Have you ever wondered why the same man who once held a woman like she was made of light suddenly turns silent, cold, unrecognizable? It doesn't happen all at once. It's never a dramatic explosion. It's a quiet dying, like warmth leaking from a room until you're left shivering in a house you used to feel safe in. You used to be gentle. You didn't build walls for sport. You listened. You cared. You responded to the tension in her voice, not to win points, but because you felt it in your gut when she was hurting. You wanted to be her peace. And for a while, it worked. She smiled like you were the first man who really saw her. She clung to your hand like you were her only anchor. But something shifted. It starts subtly. She pulls away when you reach out. She laughs at your thoughtfulness. She delays her replies. She shares more with others than she does with you. And when you ask, when you try to understand, she tells you you're overthinking, that you're too emotional, that she needs space, that you're the problem now. So you retreat a little, you try to adjust, you give her room. Thinking space is love, but the more you pull back respectfully, the more she pulls away disrespectfully. You give silence, she fills it with distance. You give patience, she answers with coldness. Suddenly, your gentleness becomes fuel for her indifference. And the worst part, you start blaming yourself for feeling it. This is how good men turn cold. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they've learned the hard way that emotional sincerity is not always met with reciprocity. That when a man opens up too early, too earnestly, he risks being used as a mirror she doesn't want to face anymore. Women don't always do this consciously. Sometimes their own emotional instability makes them crave the reassurance of a gentle man until that same reassurance becomes boring. They mistake your emotional safety for lack of edge. They crave your presence until it becomes expected. And when a woman expects without gratitude, she begins to test without consequence. She flirts with others just to see how you'll react. She withholds compliments to see if you'll work harder. She talks about her ex to compare your reaction. She stops touching you to measure your tolerance. If you chase, you lose value. If you withdraw, she plays victim. It's a setup where your only options are emotional erosion or quiet withdrawal. But here's what most men don't understand. The moment she realizes your emotional temperature is stable, she might subconsciously start playing the thermostat. She'll turn cold just to see if you'll heat up. She'll dangle attention like a reward, then punish you with absence if you stop performing. This is how a man becomes trained like a dog for validation. He doesn't even notice it at first. He just wants to make her happy. He just wants things to go back to the way they were. But every please that gets ignored, every can we talk that gets brushed off, every silent treatment that goes unchallenged chips away at his softness. Until one day, something inside clicks. It's not rage, it's not bitterness, it's not even sadness anymore. It's indifference. He doesn't want to fix it. He doesn't care what her reason was. He stops waiting for her to explain. The light in his eyes, the one she used to live for, dims. And she feels it. Women always feel it when a man emotionally checks out. But by then, it's too late. She thought his warmth would wait forever, but it doesn't. Now, listen carefully. When a woman begins to condition your behavior through emotion withdrawal, you must recognize it instantly. You'll know it's happening if she suddenly goes cold after you open up. She reacts with silence after your emotional honesty. She gives you affection when you perform, and pulls it back when you express discomfort. These are not coincidences. These are tests, and your reaction determines the future dynamic. The strategic response: do not chase. Indifference is your armor. You must let the silence stay silent. If she wants to reconnect, she will. But if you try to fix the energy every time she withholds it, she will keep using withdrawal as a weapon. Pull back harder than she does, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Show her that your emotional state is not dependent on her mood swings, that you are not her puppet, that her chaos will not shake your center. And if she never returns after you do that, good. You just avoided a lifetime of walking on eggshells, because a man who doesn't know when to stop giving ends up becoming invisible. Have you ever kept giving just to avoid being abandoned? When was the last time you went cold not to hurt her, but because you finally saw the game? Be honest. Drop your story below. You didn't want to become cold. That wasn't your nature. That wasn't how you were raised. You believed, maybe still believe, that love should be safe, that care should be consistent, that you could build something real by simply being real. But reality doesn't always reward purity. In modern relationships, sincerity without boundaries is a feast for manipulation. And women, especially the ones who've been fed attention like oxygen, know how to sense an open-hearted man the way sharks sense blood in water. Not all women are cruel, but many are conditioned. Conditioned to test, to push, to retreat just to see if you'll run after. Conditioned by culture, by social media, by men who've allowed the pattern to repeat. And once she sees that your validation is available on demand, she stops respecting it. You'll notice it when she delays replies, but always has time for group chats. You'll hear it when she talks about how men are so easy to control if you just ignore them for a bit. You'll feel it when she touches you differently, not softer, but colder, like she's rewarding a pet. And what do? At first, you try harder. You rationalize it. She's stressed. Maybe it's work. Maybe she's just testing how much I care. And so you reach out more. You soften your tone. You adjust your behavior slowly to keep the peace. That's when the shift begins. The shift from man to appeaser, from partner to performer. You begin to anticipate her moods. You apologize just to make her feel better. You stop expressing discomfort because you've learned that when you do, she punishes you with distance. And then, without knowing it, you become addicted to winning her back over and over again. This isn't love. This is psychological warfare dressed as romance. And every time she gets bored, she resets the battlefield. One moment, she'll tell you she loves your emotional depth. The next, she'll mock you for being too sensitive. One day, she'll cry in your arms and say she's lucky to have you. 2 days later, she'll say she needs space and vanish without warning. These aren't random mood swings. These are power plays. And you feel it. Not just emotionally, physically. Your chest gets tighter, your thoughts loop endlessly, your sleep is shallow, because your nervous system is now tied to her whims. This is what women do that turns gentle men cold. They misuse vulnerability as leverage. Not always maliciously, but always destructively. So what can you do? You fight back, not with anger, but with discipline. Discipline is the cure for emotional erosion. If she pulls away without reason, don't explain yourself. Stay silent. If she mocks your emotional honesty, do not defend it. Pull your energy back. If she uses her absence as punishment, do not chase. Let her sit in her own silence. Why? Because the moment you start negotiating for attention, you've already lost the frame. You've told her without words that her disrespect is negotiable, that your emotional peace is hers to disrupt. And once she knows that, she won't stop. You have to train yourself to respond, not react. If she gets cold, match her temperature. If she tests your calm, remain calmer. If she withdraws love, you don't plead, you observe. You give her the space she asked for, and then some. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most women don't respect a man's love until they feel the cost of losing it. You must become the kind of man who walks away from emotional games without announcement. You don't slam the door. You don't make a scene. You simply vanish, not out of spite, but out of value. You know your emotional warmth is sacred, and once it's taken for granted, it gets locked away. And that's when she notices, not when you send her long texts, not when you double down with apologies, not when you explain how hurt you are. She feels it the moment you stop caring, the moment your energy is no longer trying to win her back, the moment your eyes stop searching for hers in the room. That's when it hits her. He's gone, not physically, emotionally. And that absence, it echoes louder than words. She'll test again, she'll poke, she might even come back, acting soft, testing if you'll melt. But if you've truly shifted, if you've felt the cost of contorting yourself just to keep her happy, you won't melt. You'll look at her not with bitterness, but with clarity. And that's the moment she realizes she never broke you. She just taught you to guard yourself better. Have you ever noticed her pulling away the moment you opened up? What do you do when you sense her interest fading? Do you chase, or do you pull back? Have you ever felt that inner switch, the cold that came not from hate, but from exhaustion? Drop your experience below. You remember the day it changed, not a birthday, not an anniversary, not some huge fight. No, it was quiet, subtle. She didn't slam a door or raise her voice. She just stopped responding the way she used to. A short reply where there was once warmth. A shrug instead of affection. A gaze that drifted past you like you were no longer center in her world. You kept trying to fix it, to be understanding, to meet her in that space, even if it meant carrying all the weight yourself. You thought, maybe she's just tired. Maybe if I give her more love, she'll soften again. You poured in more patience, more compliments, more effort. But love, when unreciprocated, becomes a performance. And a performance without applause turns into self-humiliation. Let's be clear, not all coldness is emotional abuse. But all unchecked coldness breeds disconnection. The danger isn't just that she pulls away, it's that you stay still while it happens. That you don't challenge the shift. That you become complicit in your own emotional neglect. Because here's the brutal truth, if you don't set emotional boundaries, women will test for them, and if they don't find them, they'll push further. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, and if you allow silent treatment, disrespectful sarcasm, or emotional withdrawal, you're silently saying, I'll still be here, even if you disrespect me. That's not love, that's surrender, that's quiet self-erasure. It's the same pattern I've seen 100 times. She says she needs space and you wait, watching her stories, checking her status, hoping she reaches out. She tells you she's figuring herself out while casually posting selfies at parties, laughing in new arms. She ghosts your message for 3 days, and when she finally replies with sorry, I've been busy, you reply within 30 seconds, just grateful she remembered you existed. This isn't loyalty, it's emotional begging. You're trying to keep something alive that already flatlined, not because you're weak, but because you remember how it used to be. You're holding on to her potential, not her pattern. And that's where most men fall. They confuse the memory of who she was with the reality of who she is now. But people show you who they are in how they handle your vulnerability, in how they treat your silence, in how they react when you stop chasing. A woman who truly respects you doesn't punish you with distance. She doesn't manipulate through absence. She doesn't make you feel like a burden for asking where you stand. If she does, you have a choice to make. Not a dramatic breakup, not a screaming match, just a quiet shift in energy. You become less available. You stop initiating. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to rescue the connection from the fire she started. Instead, you watch. You see how she moves without your constant reassurance. You see if she values what you gave once she no longer has it. And if she doesn't, then you were never loved. You were just used. Used for comfort, used for attention, used for emotional support until she no longer needed it. And that realization hurts deeply, but it also sets you free. Because here's the paradox. Gentle men become cold, not because they lose the ability to love, but because they finally love themselves more than the illusion of being loved by someone else. You stop chasing people who confuse peace with boredom. You stop opening your chest for women who flinch at emotional closeness. You stop performing just to be seen and start walking like you don't need to be noticed to exist. And suddenly, things change. You speak slower. You look people in the eye longer. You stop over-explaining. Your presence grows heavier, not because you're angry, but because you're unshakable. And women feel it. They sense the shift. They come back, softer, more uncertain, testing again. But now, you don't dance. You don't flinch. You don't chase. You don't try to resurrect the warmth. Because once a man learns what it costs to be emotionally available to the wrong woman, he never gives it away cheaply again. This is how the world creates emotionally distant men, by punishing those who once tried to love gently. And if you're not careful, you'll become numb, not strong, hardened, not grounded, closed, not selective. But you can choose something different. You can become a man who loves strategically, who gives warmth to the worthy, who sets boundaries early, who spots emotional games in real time and calls them out, not with anger, but with distance. That's strength. That's quiet masculine power. And once you own that, coldness becomes a tool, not a prison. Have you ever stayed in a relationship out of memory, not reality? What's the moment that made you realize her warmth wasn't real anymore? Tell your story below. Someone else might need to hear they're not alone. You didn't want revenge. You didn't want to win some game of silence or make her suffer. That's not who you are. You just wanted it to feel like it used to when things were easy, when her smile felt real, when your efforts were met with appreciation instead of cold analysis. But the more you tried to bring back that version of her, the more invisible you became. This is the trap most gentle men fall into, believing that love is earned through effort, that if you're patient enough, kind enough, emotionally open enough, she'll see your worth. But here's the truth. They never told you effort alone never wins respect. In fact, when a woman is emotionally immature or power-hungry, your effort becomes the leash she uses to drag you through her moods. She may not even know she's doing it. But once she senses that your world revolves around her validation, she starts spinning. Fast. One day she loves how thoughtful you are. The next, she says you're too clingy. One day she says you make her feel safe. The next, she says you're not exciting anymore. One day she melts in your arms. The next, she pulls away and tells you she needs to find herself. And you sit there, spiraling, wondering what you did wrong. You go back through texts, old photos, voice messages, looking for the moment where it all started to fade. But it wasn't one moment. It was the slow erosion of respect chipped away every time you tolerated behavior you should have walked away from. You see, a woman doesn't lose interest suddenly. She tests first. She sees how you respond when she cancels plans last minute. She watches if you still praise her after she gives you the cold shoulder. She notes whether you check in on her after she goes silent for a day, just to see how much power she holds. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's insecurity. Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's just a lack of self-awareness. But the effect on you is the same: confusion, exhaustion, self-doubt. And this is when the shift happens, when your warmth becomes your prison. You find yourself walking on eggshells, laughing at jokes that sting, apologizing just to stop the silent treatments. You start making plans around her moods, censoring your truths, hiding your needs, and in the process, something inside you dies, not dramatically, quietly. The man who once stood tall starts folding, starts fading, until one day, she looks at you and she doesn't see the man she was drawn to. She sees a shell, a yes man, a tame version of the fire she used to feel, and she leaves, or worse, she stays, but treats you like furniture, emotionally available, sexually deprived, mentally drained. But here's what she never saw coming. The moment you stop trying is the moment you return to yourself. You stop chasing, you stop proving, you stop negotiating with someone who was never interested in peace, only control. And when she feels that shift, it rattles her. Not because she loves you, but because she lost the power, because you were never weak. You were just loyal. You weren't boring, you were stable. You weren't too sensitive, you were open. And now you're aware. You see the games, you recognize the patterns, you catch the subtle manipulations that once slipped by you in the name of giving her space or being understanding, and you no longer fall for it. You don't respond to her baiting, you don't chase her down when she pulls away. You don't explain yourself when she acts cold, you simply observe and withdraw. That's what turns gentlemen cold, not hatred, but exhaustion, not bitterness, but survival, not cruelty, but clarity. You learned maybe too late that love must be mutual, or it becomes a form of emotional labor. And the moment you realized she was no longer participating was the moment you stopped performing. This isn't about being heartless, it's about being wise. It's about learning how to value your energy the way you once valued her affection. It's about understanding that being a good man doesn't mean being a naive man. So now, you don't hate her, you don't even miss her, you just remember her. And every time you think about chasing that version of her again, you remind yourself that version only existed when she still respected you. And once a woman loses respect, it rarely comes back, no matter how much you beg, prove, or wait. Have you ever reached that point of exhaustion where even love couldn't motivate you to try anymore? What was the first boundary you should have set, but didn't? What would you do differently now? Knowing what you know, drop your story in the comments. You're not alone. And now, you're here. Not bitter, not broken, but different. You've walked through the fire of emotional rejection. You've begged with your silence, pleaded with your patience, negotiated with your dignity, all in the hope that the warmth would return, that she'd snap out of it, that somehow your softness would melt the distance. But what you learned in the quiet collapse of everything you gave was this: some women don't want warmth, they want dominance, they want chaos. They want the emotional edge of being unsure, of being just slightly uncomfortable, of wondering whether you'll still be there tomorrow if they push a little harder today. And if you're not aware of that pattern, you'll fall for the trap again, because they don't always leave. Some stay for months, for years, while slowly draining you, feeding off the parts of you that still hope, that still believe, that still want to be chosen, until you're no longer the man you once were, not passionate, not playful, just careful, guarded, silent. That's what coldness is. It's not power, it's protection. You start talking less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that your voice gets used against you. You stop asking questions, not because you don't care, but because you've grown tired of pretending to believe the lies. You stop giving affection, not because you've lost feeling, but because you can no longer afford to give it where it's not cherished. This transformation, it's brutal, it's lonely, but it's necessary. Because once a man sees that his emotional openness has been used as leverage, he doesn't become cruel, he becomes aware. And in that awareness, he reclaims something most men lose without even noticing his standard. You stop choosing women who are hot and cold. You stop entertaining women who confuse desire with domination. You stop giving second chances to those who used your love to sharpen their ego. Instead, you begin to watch more carefully. You watch how she treats your silence. You watch how she reacts when you say no. You watch if she listens not when you're begging, but when you're calm and direct. And if she doesn't pass those tests, you don't scream, you don't chase, you don't wait around to explain why you're walking away. You just leave, quietly, completely, and you don't come back. Because now you understand love without respect is slow self-destruction. And the man you're becoming doesn't destroy himself to please anyone. So what do women do that turns gentle men cold? They forget that warmth is a privilege, not a guarantee. They forget that presence is earned, not owed. They forget that when a man chooses to love deeply, it's not weakness, it's honor. And once that honor is violated, once that soul is bruised too many times, something irreversible happens. He stops hoping. He no longer watches the door waiting for her to walk back in. He no longer sends long texts explaining how he feels. He no longer makes excuses for her mood swings, her coldness, her absence. He just lets go. And in that moment, he becomes something rare, a man who is no longer controlled by how much she wants him, a man who no longer bends for love that doesn't bend for him, a man who knows that gentleness, without boundaries, is a slow road to emotional death. Now he gives less, but it means more. Now he loves slower, but with deeper roots. Now he speaks less, but every word lands like stone, because the fire in his heart didn't die. It just got moved somewhere safer. She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect. And now you protect it with silence. Now you protect it with standards. Now you protect it with the cold that only a once gentle man can carry. Have you reached that point where silence became your only way to stay strong? What part of yourself did you lose trying to keep her happy? And what would the man you are now tell the man you were then? Leave it below. Your words might be the mirror another man needs.